Whole Hog Sports presents the basketball podcast of Mid-America, the premier Arkansas Hoops podcast, brought to you by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Here's your host, Whole Hog Sports basketball analyst Scotty Bordelon.
Welcome into the basketball podcast of Mid-America. It is March 13th, and Arkansas basketball is headed back to the NCAA tournament. We appreciate you listening in today. I'm Scotty Bordelon of Whole Hog Sports, and I'm happy as always to be joined by Andrew Joseph of Whole Hog Sports and Bob Holt of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. I guess we can, go right ahead and get down to it. Arkansas held a watch party on Sunday at Walk-Ons in Fayetteville and learned that it was going to be, or it is, an 8 seed in the West region. They will play number 9 seed Illinois in the first round of the tournament in Des Moines, Iowa. I think this is going to be the first time that I will be in Iowa since I got lost driving home from the 2018 College World Series. I got turned around in Iowa, couldn't find my way out. Hopefully I will enjoy my experience there a little bit more this time. Looking forward to going to the tournament again. Tip-off for the game is set for 3:30 p.m. on Thursday, and the game is going to be televised by TBS. On Saturday, I was doing a lot of looking arounds. I did some pre-writing just to make sure that we could have like an instant story when the announcement was made on CBS. And I was looking at some various bracketology sites, and a team that I kept seeing matched with Arkansas was Illinois. And so I guess all that to say, I wasn't super surprised that the Razorbacks drew Illinois in their first game. I guess I'll pitch it to you guys. What's the reaction? You guys' reaction on the matchup? Were you surprised by it at all, and what maybe intrigues you?
I'm like you. I really wasn't surprised because I don't know if it was. I think it was Joe Lenardi. He basically had him playing Illinois in an 8-9 game in Des Moines, so he nailed it. I guess there's a reason he gets all those accolades. And it's an interesting matchup. The Big Ten and the SEC both got 8 teams in, the most of any conference. I think the ACC got 5 in. And so I think it speaks to the depth of the conferences. And obviously you got Purdue, that's the number 1 seed at the top of the Big Ten. And you've got Alabama, that's the number 1 overall seed at the top of the SEC. So, they have some top teams in the country. And then they have some teams like Arkansas and Illinois that, were kind of up and down, struggled. I mean, Illinois had some really good wins early. I think they beat UCLA, and they were ranked pretty high. And we know Arkansas was ranked high, and then they sort of struggled in their conference play. I think Illinois was 11-9, so a little better than Arkansas. Arkansas went 8-10, and then Illinois was 1-done in their conference tournament and lost to Penn State 3 times. So I'm sure they're glad they're not playing Penn State. Obviously, they wouldn't have matched one of the Big Ten team, but so I think it's 2 teams that have kind of had similar seasons. Start off with very high expectations, and it's been kind of up and down. And probably, if you ask their fan bases, they'd probably say it's been a disappointing season, not living up to expectations. But all that can change if you can get on an NCAA tournament run. I mean, if they make it to if one of them were to knock off Kansas, even if whoever wins this NCAA tournament game, I think it'll be good for their fans because they feel like it's been a tough year, and the winners, going to have an NCAA tournament win and get a shot at Kansas. So I think it's 2 really, powerful programs historically that have some good talent, good coaches. Had kind of a down year, and this is a chance for them to sort of, have some redemption.
Yeah, I think it's a tough year for Illinois fans. I would imagine. Like, I don't know any of them, to be real honest, but maybe this year was pretty tough just given the way that the last 2 seasons ended. You know what I mean? Like 2 years ago, there was a number 1 seed. I think they were a number 1 seed, and they had 2 National Player of the Year type guys. And I think it was Ayo Dosunmu and Kofi Coburn, and they didn't make it out of the first weekend. And then last year, they needed a pair of free throws, I think, with like 12 seconds left to beat UT Chattanooga. And then they got blasted by Houston in the second round. So those are 2 top 4 seed teams that Brad Underwood's had that, probably underperformed expectations. And then this year you're coming in as a 9 seed, which kind of tells you you've kind of had I don't want to say a middling year, but it's been, I would probably say that they're not super happy with it.
I do know that you can agree, you guys. I think they probably underperformed to their expectations, and I think their point guard, Sky Clark, they had a 5-star freshman point guard, left the team in the middle of the season. Only ended up playing 13 games, I think, but it was played about 25 minutes a game, and so I think that's a pretty big departure. And then obviously, when the first name on the Illinois scouting report's got to be Terrence Shannon, Jr., and I looked up because I know he was at Texas Tech, and I assumed
Right.
he was on Tech during the game that they played in the NCAA tournament a couple years ago, and he ended up putting 20 on them in that game that Arkansas won. And so obviously he's going to be the focal point, and I think if you can stop him, that they have a good shot.
Yeah, I think you're right too. I looked back at that box score. So that was the first thing I thought of when I saw Illinois. And I was like, Saturday for me was all about getting stuff pre-written and just kind of doing some pre-search, I guess you could call it. 'Cause we do those 5 things to know about Arkansas's first round opponent. And he led off that analysis of that column that I wrote last night that you can read on our website. He had 20 in that game. He struggled inside the arc, I think, and that's I would imagine a lot of that is Eric Musselman's game planning. You know what I mean? Just, try to run him off the 3-point line as best you could. He still got, looks from the perimeter. I think he was 3 or 4 from deep in that game and got to the free throw line quite a bit. I think maybe 5 times. He's one of the best players in the country in drawing fouls. I think he was maybe number 1 or number 2 in the Big Ten in fouls drawn per 40 minutes. Really good free throw shooter. He's crafty, left-handed. So I think that's something that Arkansas is going to have to take into account. So could see lefty Devo Davis on lefty Terrence Shannon. That would be pretty fun to watch. I think another note, Andrew, you brought up Sky Clark. I think he is in the transfer portal as of now. And I saw a tweet not too long ago that Arkansas has already reached out to him. So water is still wet. Just kind of a rundown on Illinois season. They're coming in to the tournament at 20-12 overall. They finished 11-9 in Big Ten play. The Big Ten, I just looked at the standings a few minutes ago. Purdue had 5 losses and won the league in the regular season. And then they got really pushed in the Big Ten tournament championship game by Penn State yesterday. 9 wins got them I can't remember what seed they were, but that's a league that really beats up on each other. I mean, you think about the champ with 5 losses and conference play is pretty crazy. Looking at some of their wins and losses throughout the season, they've got some pretty impressive wins, but they were, albeit pretty early in the season. They beat UCLA, who is Bob, are they a 1 or a 2 seed?
I believe UCLA is a 2 seed.
Okay, so they beat UCLA 79-70 at the Continental Tire main event in Las Vegas early in the season. Then they beat Texas 85-78 in overtime at the Jimmy V Classic in New York City. They also beat Syracuse by 29. I don't think anybody was probably mad about watching Jim Boeheim lose by that many points. And then they lost by 22 to Bob's alma mater, Missouri, in St. Louis. And then they lost to Virginia by 9 in Vegas. So that's a team that played a pretty good non-conference schedule. How do you think that, maybe those games, although they were, several months ago, do you think that prepares them pretty well for this?
Yeah, I think Illinois, played. You say the Big Ten beats up on each other, kind of like the SEC does. Although obviously Alabama was pretty dominant, and A&M I think only had 3 losses. But yeah, I think both these teams have played really good schedules. Played some, were tested in their conferences, and also played some good non-conference teams. But I think in NCAA tournament play, it's always a lot about matchups. Kind of how does Arkansas match up with them physically, and can they get I think Arkansas is going to want to play faster, and Andrew pointed out they don't have their point guard. You wonder if Eric's staff's maybe reaching out for the portal and maybe get a scouting report on the Illini at the same time. But yeah, I think these teams both have certainly played tough schedule. I think I added up. I think of Arkansas's last 22 games, including the SEC tournament, 15 of them were against teams in the NCAA tournament, and the last 5. So it's almost like Arkansas has been playing the NCAA tournament for about 3 weeks, or something like that. I mean, in terms of the caliber of teams they've been playing, obviously they're familiar with these SEC teams and scout them up, and played A&M for the 3rd time, and Auburn for the 2nd time, and Kentucky for the 2nd time, and all that. But Illinois the same way. So they may be glad to get out of their leagues right now, even if they're playing another Power 5 opponent.
Yeah, I was listening to Brad Underwood last night. I think him, Coleman Hawkins, and Terrence Shannon spoke to some of the Illinois media on Sunday night, and that's what Brad Underwood mentioned, that he's ready to play somebody that is not in the Big Ten. He said like it actually energizes him a little bit to be able to look at somebody outside of his league and not a team like Purdue that's got Zach Edey and then a bunch of other guys, on the perimeter that can shoot it, or a Penn State team. I think that what they may have set the single season school record for threes made in a season, and you can go on and on down the list. The Big Ten's a really, really good conference. In conference play, it looks like Illinois' best wins came against Michigan State and Michigan at home. I watched that Michigan game. I think it went into double overtime. It's an absolutely insane game. Their final two games of, before Selection Sunday were a 5-point loss at Purdue, which I think that's not into moral victories, I wouldn't imagine, but if you lose to, a number one seed by a handful of points on their home floor, it's not bad. Then they lost to Penn State in the first round of the Big Ten tournament by 3. Both of those are tournament teams. What do you make of Illinois? I'm not entirely sure, because it seems like in the non-conference portion, maybe they just were ahead of schedule compared to maybe some of the other top teams that they played at that point in the season, and then things just changed. Do you think I'm off on that?
No, I think I like when Arkansas went to Maui and looked so good. Of course, Trevor Brazile was healthy then, but the Arkansas and Maui to me looked like a top 10 team. I mean,
Yeah.
they hammered Louisville, which as we know
Who
now is
didn't?
not an incredible accomplishment. But hey, the bottom line is they hammered them, and they beat them by what was it, 26 or something. And then they played a really, really good Creighton team, and that was one of the most entertaining games I watched all year, honestly. And then they beat a really good, San Diego State's had a great year. I mean, I think is San Diego State a 5 seed, I think, and
Yeah.
Arkansas beat them in overtime. That was a huge win for Arkansas. Really, that's a win that helped them get in the tournament. And then, like I say, getting in the SEC, it was just more of a struggle. Part of it's because the SEC is really good, and then Arkansas, like Eric has pointed out many times, it's not a balanced schedule in Arkansas. And I think Auburn probably had the two roughest SEC schedules there is. And so maybe that explains, why one's an 8 seed and I guess Auburn's a 9 seed. Auburn gets to basically play a home game, which is a little head
They
scratching. I'm
got
sure.
Alabama and Auburn in Birmingham.
Yeah, no, you definitely get Alabama being there. Now, if Houston ends up having to play Auburn in the second round game in Birmingham, they're probably going to think, "Hey, this ain't cool,"
Right.
So we'll see how that happens. It'd kind of be like if Kansas had to play. Of course, Kansas, assuming they'll play, that Des Moines will be essentially a home game for them. I tell you what, I think that's going to be a tough ticket between, Illinois not very far, Arkansas is pretty close, and obviously it's Kansas's backyard. But I guess getting back to your original question, I think the conference seasons wore on these teams. Also, Arkansas and Illinois, they have some older players, but they have some younger players too, and I
Yeah.
think that's talent is talent, and that's great. But also, as good as Anthony Black is and Nick Smith and Jordan Walsh and these guys, it's first time they've gone through this grind before, so there's an adjustment period even for guys who are going to be lottery picks.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on the experience factor there. I think experience is just such a huge part in team success and in college basketball, and especially in March Madness. And I think when you look at Illinois, their top two guys in terms of minutes played and points per game are both seniors, Terrence Shannon Jr. and Matthew Meyer, both transfers from Power Five schools that have NCAA tournament experience. Matthew Meyer was on that championship team at Baylor. And then you look at Arkansas's top guys in terms of minutes played is Anthony Black, a freshman, top scorer, Nick Smith Jr., a freshman. And so I think I personally think that experience is a huge factor in whether or not a team can be successful in March Madness. And obviously, I think Illinois kind of has the edge on Arkansas there, but Arkansas does have the talent, like you said.
I think life can be pretty funny sometimes, and not to get weird, but that's just kind of how I wanted to segue into Matthew Meyer, talking about him a little bit. I have, ever since I learned about him playing at Baylor, I've long thought that this kid, like if something ever happened to my brother and somebody asked me what he looks like, I would say that he looks like Matthew Meyer. And so that's kind of strange just to see him just kind of pop back up. Obviously remember him from the Elite Eight run. I think he was kind of a key reserve piece on that team. Kind of an energy guy. Like you look up and down all these rosters in the NCAA tournament field, you've got energy guys that come off the bench. He was that for Baylor, and it's kind of cool to see his game evolve. I think as a one of the primary scoring options at Illinois. I think he's their top shot blocker. I think he's third or fourth in steals and assists. So I think he's got a really, really versatile game. And it's funny too, because a couple weeks ago, maybe not even that long ago, he went viral. I think in an interview when he said after a game that, he had too many Monster energy drinks and he had I think he got caffeine poisoning. So he had to miss a couple days of practice. Next time he goes out on the floor, he scores 24 points and helps, Illinois beat Michigan in double overtime. He kind of seems like an interesting character. And I was doing some digging on him. Just, I wrote about him. He was one of the 5 things to know about Illinois that I wrote about. And Brad Underwood is a really, really big fan of him. He's an all Big Ten caliber player. I think he was named to the second team, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he's averaging over 12 points, really good rebounder, like I mentioned, good shot blocker. And Brad Underwood just went on and on about, his footwork. Like I think he said it was, I'll have to find this exact quote. Hold on. He said his footwork defies logic a little bit, and just that it's so unorthodox. And so I think he's going to be one of those guys that is going to be put maybe in some isolation situations with maybe a Jordan Walsh type or Mekhi Mitchell, somebody like that. How do y'all see the matchup with him going? Because he seems like a guy that could give Arkansas some problems because he's 6'9", but he obviously very mobile.
Yeah, I agree. It could be a matchup problem because he's got the size, but he also looks to be comfortable on the perimeter. I'm not saying he's, Larry Bird.
Yeah, he leads them in threes, mate. Yeah.
So yeah, I remember that from before. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see the defensive assignment. And I do think Jordan Walsh, for a true freshman, is an excellent defensive player, just a good on the ball defender. So that would probably be the matchup. Maybe Mekhi, although if you put Mekhi on him, I just see Mekhi getting 3 fouls in 10 minutes, having to go to the bench, and he's been playing well. And of course, Jordan can get in foul trouble too. So I'm sure that's a big part of Illinois' game plan is let's get these guys in foul trouble, and get to the free throw line.
For sure. The Basketball Podcast of Mid-America is sponsored by Landers Toyota of Northwest Arkansas. Visit their showroom at 411 South Metro Parkway in Rogers or online at landerstoyotanwa.com.
For all your automotive needs, shop Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers, where we guarantee you the best buying experience and best service after the sale in Arkansas. Landers Toyota NWA in Rogers.
Andrew, you got any thoughts on Matthew Meyer? Have you watched him at all this year?
Yeah, I also watched that double overtime game. I think it must have been nationally televised because I don't particularly.
Yeah, I think it was on ESPN. Yeah, you're not watching Illinois basketball intentionally.
I don't specifically search that out, but I did watch that, and it was a hell of a game. And Terrence Shannon Jr. caught my eye that game, and Matthew Meyer as well. And I mean, you could tell those two are kind of the heart and soul of that Illinois team. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but if there's ever, I know if you're gonna put money on a game or a prop bet or something, to always take the under of Arkansas's opponent's star player. And so I think Arkansas is going to go all out and try and stop Terrence Shannon Jr. Or Matthew Meyer. And so I think Illinois is going to have a role player or some guy that steps up to be the hero. And I think that's always the case when it comes to these games. Like you think about Trey Wade playing out of his mind in the Gonzaga game. And I think, that's kind of what makes March Madness so fun, is that, you have these moments to remember by guys that aren't necessarily on the forefront of your mind at the moment, but then they make a name for themselves.
For sure. I think Devo Davis definitely qualifies for that too, especially on that run that he went on during his freshman year. I think another guy to watch for with Illinois is Coleman Hawkins. I mean, he's a guy I didn't really write about him at all, other than I think he's their number 2 shot blocker, could be number 3. So he's a presence on the interior. I think and this is obviously I'm an Illinois outsider, but just looking at some of the numbers and stuff, pretty good scorer, good rebounder. I think he leads them in minutes played. So, he might be the kind of the glue that maybe holds that team together. When Terrence Shannon or Matthew Meyer might be having an off game. For Arkansas, this is its 3rd straight tournament appearance under Eric Musselman. I think it's his 6th and 8th seasons as a college head coach, and the 2020 tournament didn't happen. Don't know if Arkansas would have made that or not. We will never know. Arkansas is 20-13 overall as they head to Iowa. They started the season 11-1 and then finished 9-12 after SEC play began in late December. I don't know what my expectations are as I'm going to Iowa tomorrow. What do you guys expect? Like, I think I've got it made up in my mind, and it's statistical based research that I think Arkansas is probably going to win its first round game. What are you guys' impressions? What do you expect this week?
Yeah, well, I think it'll be a really tight game because Arkansas has played a lot of tight games, and so has Illinois. And I mean, there's a reason it's an 8-9 matchup. On paper as even as you can get, and I think it should be one of the more interesting matchups. I thought it was interesting with Jay Wright, the longtime Villanova coach, won a couple national titles, went to a Final Four last year, and then decided to retire. I think at 61. So I think that speaks to, one, how much money these guys make these days, and then 2, he wasn't obviously as young as Coach K or as old as Coach K or Roy Williams or some of these other guys, but transfer portal and NIL and stuff, I think, it's making the job more demand. I mean, Arkansas is getting ready for its biggest game of the year in the NCAA tournament. And you see on Twitter, they've reached out to 10 guys in the transfer portal because that's just what they do. And of course, they got a huge staff, but it's kind of like, football coaches are getting ready doing bowl practices and they're hitting the portal and finishing up recruiting. And now you've got, and of course, Arkansas has dealt with this with these deep NCAA tournament runs. It's kind of a double-edged sword. You want to have a good NCAA tournament run, and if you're in the Elite Eight, it's like, hey, yeah, we want you to come to Arkansas. We're in the Elite Eight. I mean, that's a pretty good selling point, right? Along with all the other, attributes that Eric brings to the table, the NBA experience, and all these NCAA tournament. This is 6th straight, like you said, when they've had a tournament. So, but yeah, it's a crazy time because you're getting ready for games, but you're also having to hit the portal. I can't really remember what your question was now, but that's just something that popped in my head.
Expectations for the week, I guess. I mean, do you not to do prediction time, but like, do you feel like Arkansas's got what it takes to win its first round game and then maybe give its best shot to Kansas?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think they should be. I mean, I think they've been operating under a lot of pressure because the expectations were so high all year. And maybe that's had something to do with some of the blowing leads as they start pressing a little bit, or maybe, teams just figure some things out and the young guys, struggle with finishing games. But, they obviously have the talent to compete with anybody. I guess I was going to say Jay Wright spoke very highly of, he liked Arkansas in this game and he liked them in not that he was picking them to beat Kansas, but he thought they could, be a challenge to Kansas. So that's pretty high praise from obviously a very accomplished coach. I know the Arkansas fans in the restaurant were cheering when they saw that. And I think Arkansas, we talked to Anthony Black about that. And, he's a confident kid. And there have been some pockets this year where Arkansas has played really, really well, but they've had trouble sustaining that. So yes, well, can they play 2 games really, really well in 4 days and well enough to beat Illinois and then have a shot to upset Kansas? And, Kansas has been dealing, they got hammered by Texas in the Big 12 championship game. Didn't have their coach, Bill Self. He had some kind of heart procedure, and he's supposed to be back for the game. I think Bill's 60. Looks to be in pretty good shape, but it's a stressful job. And maybe that's why Jay Wright retired, But, let's say Arkansas beats Illinois. And I don't think Kansas will have any trouble with Howard, but they obviously Kansas showed some vulnerability late in the year. So, who knows? But I think for Arkansas, it's like, hey, let's just go out there and see what we can do. And I don't feel like they have a lot of pressure on them.
Andrew, what do you think happens against Illinois?
I think that depends on which version of which teams show up, because I think
Fair.
you could just get so many different versions of the Illinois team just as much as you can get the sloppy Arkansas team that turns the ball over, doesn't rebound, or you could get this physically intense Arkansas team that runs the floor with the best teams in the country. And so I really do think it's going to come down to maybe, I think experience is key. I think playing with like keeping your emotions in check is going to be huge for the guys that haven't been there. And I think this 8-9 matchup is kind of everything it's expected to be. Like, it's 8-9 matchup, like we said, for a reason. Which, if you're playing in those 8-9 matchups, I can't imagine you particularly like, because you have to play such an evenly matched team, and then if you win, you have to face the number one seed the next round. So it's not really an ideal draw, but I think it's going to come down to who can not be sped up by the moment, and just kind of, if Arkansas's freshmen can let their talent speak for itself rather than trying to press and do too much, I think they'll be all right.
Yeah, I think if Arkansas's freshmen played like they did Thursday against Auburn, I mean, I don't really have any doubt in my mind that Arkansas will advance. I'm looking for, like, where's Ricky Council? Like, Ricky is your leading scorer, and I know a lot of people are going to be, probably talking and writing about him because he is Arkansas's leading scorer. He was a, all SEC pick on the second team by the coaches and by Bob Holt and some other guys that vote on the AP. But I think he's been, I don't know that he's been the most inconsistent guy. He's been pretty consistent. But there are also times when it's just like, man, if Ricky could have, given that team, 6 more points, given them a couple more rebounds, been a little bit more active on defense, and, Arkansas might be sitting with, 22, 23 wins. Got a couple other things to run by you guys. One of you mentioned close games, and I did this before we even got together to start recording this. I went through Arkansas's schedule and Illinois' schedule and looked at how both of those teams did in close games, which I classified as 6 points or less. So Arkansas for the season went 4-8 in games decided by 6 points or less. They were 2-2 on neutral floors. So I don't like the stage obviously is a little bit greater than playing at Maui, which is still a pretty prestigious tournament to be in, and then the SEC tournament. So Arkansas's got some experience, I think, playing tight games on neutral floors. But this will be the first time it will be like this, kind of the winner go home type thing. Like it's completely different when you go to the tournament. Like, if you lose, you go home, but you still felt pretty good. Even if Arkansas lost to Auburn, they were still going to have at least one more game to play. Illinois finished the season 2-5 in games decided by 6 points or less. They were 0-1 on a neutral floor. That was against Penn State last week. I think if you go 7 points or less, or 9 points or less, Illinois, they beat, like I mentioned earlier, they beat UCLA by 9 on a neutral floor, and then they beat Texas by 7 in overtime on a neutral floor. So both of these teams, I think, have some experience on neutral floors. Another thing that I think gives me some optimism, that Arkansas will win on Thursday and move on to play Kansas, is a few years ago, I think, when COVID was still kind of rearing its ugly head in the SEC schedule. I think Arkansas had a game against Texas A&M canceled or postponed, and so Arkansas went like 8 days without, I think, between games. So they beat maybe Florida. We're supposed to play Texas A&M. That game got whacked, and then their next game was Alabama at home. And so I just went back and I researched how Eric's teams at Nevada and Arkansas have done, with 4+ days between games, and I had not kept up with that list since I did the story on that. I updated it this morning and found some pretty interesting stuff. So this year this season with 4 more days between games, Arkansas is 7-1. Their lone loss is at LSU to open SEC play. In Eric's college head coaching career, so at Nevada and Arkansas, he is 51-10 overall. That's an 83.6% win percentage, which is pretty damn good. In the postseason, he's 13-3, and in the NCAA tournament, he's 5-2. So
Pretty
I
good
think that
odds.
yeah, those are numbers that I think you have to really, really like if you're an Arkansas fan. And I went back and um, the current streaks that he has, 7 consecutive postseason wins. So that means, SEC tournament and NCAA tournament. And another streak is Arkansas's won 4 consecutive NCAA tournament games. Or Eric's teams have won 4 consecutive NCAA tournament games with 4 more days to prepare. Bob, does that make you want to pencil in Arkansas the second round?
Well, I think it definitely works in their favor. I think it speaks to the extensive scouting that Eric and his staff do. He's got a huge staff, and of course, a lot of those
Yeah.
guys are working on the portal right now, and they're scouting Illinois. But I remember when Eric got hired in that first presser where he's wearing a coat and tie, which seems so weird now. And because he never, I think it was maybe the last time I've seen him at a tie. And but he said they were going to have NBA style scouting reports. And I know they don't want to overload the players, but I think Arkansas probably does as good a job as prepping their guys, scouts, as any team in the country, I would have to imagine. And I think that goes to Eric's, NBA background. We have to do quick turnarounds and scout up teams in a hurry. Of course, they've got, several days to work on Illinois. But yeah, I just think I don't. It doesn't always translate to victories, but I don't think Eric leaves any stone unturned when they're getting ready for an opponent, especially when he has that much time.
Just a little bit of an example of like the depth of the scouting reports. I was watching Hogs Plus earlier today. They did a video just kind of detailing what Arkansas did the day before it played Auburn. And Arkansas did kind of a walkthrough on an outdoor court before they got inside Tennessee State's arena. And Arkansas was literally, they were working on defending baseline out of bounds plays, defending specifically only Allen Flanigan. And there was a line that was formed where they had Allen Flanigan. He was like stationed. I think Eric was actually playing Allen Flanigan in this scenario. So Eric would stand on the right block, and then he would run a motion like Flanigan would run on that particular baseline out of bounds play. And he had like a line of guys. I think like 6 or 8 different guys came through the line and defended Allen Flanigan, quote unquote, going through that baseline out of bounds. So they're going to be very well prepared. I think the way Arkansas defends those specials, the baseline out of bounds, the sideline out of bounds, the after timeout plays, those are where you can steal buckets that make a really big difference in a game. I think Arkansas is going to be pretty well prepared for that. As Eric, I think I asked him about Brad Underwood Sunday night, and he said that I think later that night they were going to get into just the quick hitters, the out of bounds plays that Illinois likes to get into. Another thing, because somebody, I think it was Andrew, mentioned experience. KenPom actually has a metric for that, and I think it's average Division I experience. KenPom has Illinois as the 6th least D1 experience among teams in the tournament field, and Arkansas is 11th. So you got 2 of the, I guess, top 11 least experienced Division I, teams in the field going at it in the first round. And how they come up with that is like a freshman is considered to have 0 Division I experience because they haven't played a year yet. So sophomores have 1, juniors have 2, seniors, I guess. I'm not a math major. I count on KenPom to get all that stuff done, but he's got Arkansas actually as the more experienced team here. So it was really interesting to hear Eric's talked all season, just about how young his team is and how inexperience has kind of come to bite them in the backside a lot. Brad Underwood mentioned that too when I listened to him Sunday night. So I think Arkansas is obviously going to be counting on a lot of young guys, but I think you need some experienced guys like the Mitchell twins, at least one of them, right? And Ricky Council's got to step up, and I think Devo might be my X factor going into this tournament. So just considering he's stepped up at some really big moments, and this is his 3rd trip to the tournament, so he definitely knows what to expect. You guys got do we miss anything?
No, not.
Oh, did anything jump out to you guys about the bracket just in general?
I thought A&M got a tough seed.
I did too, man. 7's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Bob, were you surprised that A&M got a a 7, and who did they draw as a 10 seed? It's pretty.
Penn State.
Yeah, drawing Penn.
Yeah, first round.
That's a hell of a first round game for a 7-10.
Yeah, and then they've got Texas if they win.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and that may help. I mean, the NCAA committee, they like, they have maybe a head coach who worked for this other coach faces, mentor pupil matchup. They like those regional matchups, and yeah, you thought on paper the way, and I know they lost home to Wofford. Maybe that's a sin that can never be forgiven, But certainly A&M, went 15-3 in the league and then made it to the championship game, and so I guess that makes them 17-4 against SEC teams. A league that sent 8 teams to the NCAA tournament. Although they didn't play a great non-conference schedule, and then they stubbed their toe, losing to Wofford, and they lost to Boise State, which actually is an NCAA tournament team. They lost to them in Fort Worth. But I wonder if the committee. I thought A&M would be like a 5 seed, 6 at the absolute lowest.
Yeah,
and but if they're a 6 seed, they can't play Texas in the second round. So I wonder if they said we want, and of course they're going to be in the Texas is going to be in the SEC in a couple seasons, but I guess they played in baseball in the postseason, some different things. But I can't help but think that maybe the reason A&M's a 7 seed is so they could match them up with Texas in the second round. I got to believe that factored into it anyway.
for sure. I don't know if y'all have filled out brackets yet. I did one late last night right before bed, so I don't know if I was thinking clearly. But I think I had Arizona, Purdue, Texas, and Gonzaga in my Final Four, and I think I've got Arizona winning it. I was pretty impressed. I've been impressed with them all year since I think they won in Maui, and then they beat UCLA over the weekend in the Pac-12 tournament championship game. So we'll have to see. I probably will miss on all of those. That would be pretty typical, I think, of this time of the year. It's so unpredictable. But we appreciate you guys listening in today. Bob and I are headed to Iowa. Later in the week, we'll have full coverage of Arkansas's practice day on Wednesday. We'll get some practice footage from that. We'll talk to Eric and some players, talk to Brad Underwood, probably some Illinois players too. So there's going to be plenty of content coming on Whole Hog Sports throughout the week. And hopefully I can get Bob to sit down in a chair again with the playing court in the background and get him to tell us some stories. So until next time, I think we're planning on, if Arkansas wins its first round game, we'll probably record a podcast again later in the week. Definitely, if Arkansas advances out of the weekend, we'll definitely do that. But for Scotty Borderline, thanks to Andrew Joseph and Bob Holt for joining me today. We'll holler at you again, possibly later in the week.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.